everyone, I'm so glad to be with you as we finish up our series about seeing God at work in ourselves, in others, and in the world around us. As Christians, we can have these mountaintop moments with God. Maybe you've had one at camp, or during worship, or during a deep conversation with a friend. These are times when you really feel God's presence and everything makes sense. But then what? What happens when camp is over? Or when Monday comes and you're back at school? What about when things go from being awesome to awful? When you feel lonely, stressed out, or unsure about life? Sometimes we think we can only see God when everything feels perfect. But we know that those feelings don't last forever. And maybe you're thinking, I've never had a moment like that with God. How do I even know he's real? Well, those are real questions, and you're not the only one that's asking them. So maybe a question to ask that's better is this: can we see God even when life feels dry or ordinary? Well, I need to let you know that God is in the ordinary moments too. There's a story in the Bible that helps us understand this. It's in a book called 1 Kings. And it tells us about God's people during a time when they had kings, when kings messed up. And that happened a lot. God sent prophets to help guide these kings. One of those prophets was a guy named Elijah. Elijah saw God do some pretty wild things, like fire coming from the sky, different kinds of miracles, and so much more. He definitely had some mountaintop moments. But there was also a time when Elijah was feeling scared and tired. He was hiding in a cave, and he really needed to hear from God. And this is what we find in 1 Kings. Here's what happened. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain." As Elijah stood there, there was a mighty windstorm that hit the mountain, but the Lord wasn't in the wind. Then there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. Then there was a fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. That's in 1 Kings 19:11 through 12. Elijah was used to seeing God in big, loud, and exciting ways. So you can imagine he was probably surprised when God didn't show up in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire. Then something different happened. Here's what we read. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and stood at the entrance of the cave. God showed up in a gentle whisper. Why? Well, maybe it was to remind Elijah and us that God isn't only in loud or exciting moments. God is also in the quiet and in the simple moments. He's in those everyday moments. So how do we see God every day? Well, the Bible gives us a clue in the book of Galatians. We learn about the fruit of the Spirit, the things we can look for and know and see that God is at work. It says, the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's stuff that we can notice every day in ourselves and in others, and even in those little moments. For example, when someone shows you kindness at school, or when you feel peace in your heart during a tough situation. It can also happen when you choose self-control and walk away from the drama. These aren't flashy or loud, but they're real. And they're signs that God is at work in your life and in the world around you. So what can we do this week that can help us? Well, here's how you can start to notice God more. First, look for God. Pay attention to the little moments of joy, peace, or help. Look for those fruits of the Spirit. Look at others, and where do you see them showing kindness and love in their lives? Third, look at yourself. How are you growing? You can see God, not just at camp or during big church events, but in your everyday life. So here's the challenge. What's one ordinary part of your life where you can look for God this week? Maybe it's in your walk to school, while doing chores, or while hanging out with your friends or family. Look and listen. You just might hear God and his gentle whisper. Have a beautiful week, everybody.